Welcome to Root Shock, the show where we explore holistic healing through a cross-cultural lens. I'm your host, Hannah Titus, medical anthropologist and holistic health specialist. Today's episode is about West African drumming as a healing technology, a communication system, and a somatic practice, all stewarded by over 1,000 years of known lineage. We're talking about how this practice fosters communal connection and ancestral connection, grounds us to the land, and serves as a vital technology for healing the mental, physical, and emotional planes. Let's dig in. In the last episode of Root Shock, we learned about the critical importance of oral histories and how access to the written word has been historically restricted by the state, especially for Black folks, indigenous folks, and other communities of color. What do these things have in common with drumming? Well, I'm glad you asked. Drumming is a critical component of oral histories. The drums have a language that passes down histories, colors multisensory storytelling, and marks the passage of time and major events in community life. And just like reading, writing, and the right to peaceful assembly, African drumming was banned for Black Americans in the United States after 1739, following the Stono Rebellion. If you'd like to hear more about Stono, the largest slave rebellion in U.S. history, drop me a line and we can dig into a big old bonus episode on this critically important event in our nation's history. Y'all know all I need is a whiff of interest before I start to monologue about revolution. So call me, beat me if you want to reach me. We'll talk about Stono. We'll talk about how these drums contributed to one of the most large rebellions in this nation's history. But what you need to know now is this. Drums were outlawed because they were recognized as a way that enslaved people celebrated life, and because they were used as a way to organize and rebel against their oppressors. The technology of African polyrhythms, which could raise group morale, facilitate healing, and convey complex messages across vast distances, threatened power holders. Thus, they outlawed the practice. But when the drums were taken, the beats did not disappear. No, they moved into the bodies of the people. Remembered in dance, in story, in drumming on their own bodies, giving rise to practices like tap dancing and stepping, and eventually becoming the backbone of nearly all forms of modern music in America. That's right, it all came from African polyrhythms. This is a healing technology that goes deep, that interweaves with stories of land, spirit, ancestry, and community connectedness. A technology that spans every aspect of life, from big life milestones like births, marriages, and deaths, to small moments of transition within a work or a school day. It's more than an instrument. It's more than music. It's a technology that has been applied as a communication system across vast distances, and that has told stories across generations. West African drumming is a healing technology that survived the Middle Passage through the hearts, minds, and bodies of the people. For that very reason, in respect and honor of the people that carried it, we take the time to go deep on this topic. So today, we're looking at what the djembe is really all about and why it remains a vital resource for all. We're joined today by our guest, Mr. Francis Agyakwa. Francis wears many hats. He is a first-generation Ghanaian immigrant, a proud father, a TEDx speaker, and a dedicated advocate for community health. Since arriving in the U.S. from Ghana in 2003, Francis has worked on the front lines of community healing, serving as a certified compassion fatigue trainer and trauma-informed specialist. Formerly an adjunct professor at the University of Denver's Graduate School of Social Work, he now brings his expertise to the Colorado Department of Human Services. His work lies at the intersection of ethnomusicology and somatic healing. Through his program, Drumming Out Stress, Francis uses his deep knowledge of West African drumming traditions to challenge Western reductionist views on health, demonstrating how polyrhythms foster the exact resilience, creativity, and connection our communities need to heal from systemic trauma. So join us as we explore the power of African polyrhythms, the power of the djembe. Ground us and to root us into place and moment. What land are you speaking from today, and who or what has been nourishing you lately?
I believe it's the youth people land. And so I want to acknowledge that. Lately, I've been grounded by this intersection of my identity as a Black African, growing up with this unbelievable connection to rituals and traditions. I identify as a Black African. Of course, I'm a naturalized American citizen, a community advocate. I am big on equity, inclusivity, justice. But the most important identifier, I am a Black man who is also a single father with my two beautiful boys who are 14 and 10. And that is the most important thing to me in my life right now. My first son just turned 14 a week ago. And just watching the change and having grappling with, you are growing up in this society of whiteness or majority culture, and it's my responsibility as an African to give you this identity of being a Black man growing up in Lakewood, Colorado, in the suburbs, where you have the privilege of going to a great school and not taking that for granted, and also understanding that when you grow up, all of this, people are going to see you differently because of the way you look. So all of this, these three things have really been grounding me lately, and being very intentional on how I approach parenting as a Black man raising a kid in a suburbia Lakewood where it's predominantly white.
I can see that. And it's beautiful the way that you're navigating those multiplicities. What is it like to navigate the intersectionality of moving from Africa to Lakewood, Colorado, being a father, passing your iteration of your Black identity down to your son? What has that journey been like?
It's been interesting. It's been challenging. It's been also fulfilling at the same time. So I'm divorced, and so really navigating being a single dad, was married to a white woman, and now trying to really help my son identify. Yes, you have this duality of being born by a white woman and a Black man. Unfortunately, the world only sees one. And that is the one that I'm going to focus on most, and that is your Blackness. And I always say it's my responsibility to pass on the good of being a Ghanaian, and then also to pass on the good of being an American. And that has been very interesting to navigate, because sometimes the two clash in terms of the definition of what family is, the definition of what a man is, the definition of what is expected of you as a Black man, bringing the idea of to care about other people, not just financially, but to really care about other people in different ways. So trying to teach him to be loving with his little brother, to step up and support him in different things. So teaching that, definitely, it's been interesting. It's been an interesting journey.
I imagine. Thank you for sharing that. We're talking about drumming today, and I'd love to know how drumming as a tool intersects with these personal journeys. How has drumming provided support for you as you navigate post divorce, as you navigate fatherhood and trying to raise two boys in a very white area?
drumming is part of who I am. Let's connect together and play the drums and talk about ancestry. Let's talk about the strength that you get from really learning deeply into something that is important to your culture, something that is important to your heritage. And I think that drumming has always been something that connects me to who I am. And it's also a call to strength of my ancestors. It is not just something that I play for the sake of playing or entertainment, but it's also sort of calling on the strength of my heritage and my ancestry. It's about strength. Drum has been an integral part of really throughout this journey. When I bought this house, the first thing I did when I came face to face with the idea of, oh man, I get to now think about a single income social worker just bought a house in suburbia Lakewood. I have to think of mortgage payment. I have to think of all of this. And I got on my drum and just as a symbol of strength, playing, and my ancestors reminding me, hey, do you know what your name is? Your name is, you're never alone. So we would always gonna be with you. We're always gonna be there for you. So for me, I think drumming has been an anchor that I can always go to remind me of who I am, to remind me of the time I get to spend with my grandfather, the time that I get to spend in the community, going to ceremonies and being a kid and asking the elders, can I play? Can I listen to this? It's just an incredible piece of strength for me. And as a reminder of where I've come from and where I'm going. And
What beauty when the realities of a capitalistic economy overwhelm you. Mortgage payment, I'm in a helping profession, healthcare payments, school payments. What beauty to be able to sit down at your house with your emergency emotional support drum and connect to the strength of your lineage, of your ancestors, as you said, to remind you who you are. It's beautiful. Can you tell me more about how you originally came to drumming as a practice and how your grandfather and your community introduced you to drumming?
so, as you've been to Ghana before, you will realize that in Ghana, drumming is part of every ceremony, every transition in our lives. When I was about 10, my mom would send me during summer to be with my grandfather. And as the head of the community of his village, taking me to ceremonies and people playing, and I'll be dancing. And I just loved the rhythm of it. There was this connection that I had with traditional music and traditional ceremonies and rituals. And so there were rituals that actually kids were not permitted to see. And my grandfather would wake me up and sneak me to the back and say, do not let anybody see you. Because kids are not supposed to see these rituals at midnight, where they are sacrificing goat and where they get to pick somebody to be a chief or a king. Those were rituals that were sacred and nobody was supposed to see that. But I had an opportunity to see them. And when the drummers came out, they ushered somebody who has been selected, ancestors have chosen as the king or the queen of the village, and the drumming. And I see this spiritual takeover, the drummers and the people, the elders sitting there, everybody just is sort of possessed by this ritual, this drumming. I just couldn't help it. And I'll go home and I'll pick a drum and start playing. And my grandfather will say, no, that's not how you play it. This is how you play it. And I start dancing. And by the time I got to elementary school, I was the drummer who called out all the breaks. Here in high school, people use the bell. Back home growing up, the drumming was a call to change lessons. And I became that person. And I think for me, I didn't even realize how important what I was being given was until 2012, 2015, when I was an adjunct professor at DU and had an opportunity to present a proposal to look at the correlation between drumming and stress or trauma, because trauma had become my area of study. I was fortunate enough to manage a child welfare trauma-informed project during the Obama administration. And when I started really making the link between drumming and stress relief and healing, I came here and started this research, and I just felt so pulled back in. Remember the voice of my grandfather actually saying, I am so glad you're back to this root, this idea of connecting to your ancestry and all those rituals that you saw. So that has been my journey, introduction to drumming. And right now, I always tell myself, I'm making sure that as I grow and academically become more inclined or research and talking about all of this, that I never lose sight of this incredible gift of drumming that my ancestors passed on, which is also a very sacred place for people to heal, bring people together. Because back home, we never really played a drum alone. Anytime you hear a drum, the communities are coming together. Even if the women were singing, clapping, the men were playing, and children were dancing. So that is what has inspired my journey to really incorporate drumming into everything that I'm doing now outside of my professional work. And now I feel like really the call for me is to integrate this into society and make it my full passion of bringing healing through my ancestry to people who have never really experienced or don't know what that is.
Yes. Big yes. I love the imagery of changing classes to the drum, the beating, and just one kid, just
Yes.
you, just going hard. No
Yes.
practice yards. Drumming out all your emotions between
I
class. I am
know. I know.
obsessed
And I
with
wish
that
there were
image.
videos.
Uh-huh.
Those were some great memories.
You've mentioned just a little bit, a sprinkling about what the ceremonies looked like for you in Ghana growing up. You've spoken before on how different parts of the drum symbolize different elements of the earth and how people might honor the earth and bring their spirituality into the ceremony. Can you speak more on that and what that looks like?
Yeah, so growing up, the making of the drum itself is a very spiritual thing. Look, I'm 50 and I'm proud of it to be 50. But growing up, now when you visit Ghana, people are just making drums versus when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, there were people who were assigned to make specific drums. So people who made the drums that is played for when a king is chosen to be outdoor to the community. There was people who were chosen specifically to make specific type of drums because of their connection to the ancestry, their connection to Mother Earth, their connection to the chief or the queen and all of that. So before a drum is made, the animal that is chosen itself is an animal that has been recognized worthy of sacrifice to our ancestors, right? And so that alone is a spiritual connection. The animal is presented. There's a libation that is poured. We ask our ancestors to receive the blood of this animal that is going to be sacrificed. And when the skin is taken off to make the drum, so first of all, you know that one, this animal is considered worthy by ancestors. And so the skin that is going to be the head of the drum. Now you go into the forest and you choose a specific wood that really fits, that is going to make the sound. So depending on whether you're making a phantom from, or you're making the dondo, the talking drum, or you're making the kalogo drum, all these specific drums, there was specific use of it. We did not just play it like today. People can just play the djembe anywhere, anyhow, right? Those drums were made specifically for specific ceremonies. And so whoever goes and chop down the tree is talking about, I need permission from Asase, our Mother Earth, to take one of your children, the tree, symbolism of the children of the forest, of the Mother Earth, and bring it, carve it, and then put that animal skin. So before the completion of the drum, you know that there's been series of rituals that have already been taking place. There's series of prayers that have been said to our ancestors in order for one drum to be made. And so you know that when you play that drum, you are calling the blood of the animal that has gone back to Mother Earth. You are calling Mother Earth, who's given us the tree, the wood for the base of the drum. We're calling on all of them. When we play the drum, we are not just playing it, but we are giving back our tears, we're giving our toils, we're giving all of the stresses of this life, and we are giving thanks back to Mother Earth for taking all those burdens away from us based on the gift that she's given us.
What's really striking me about what you're saying is how much it has in common with other indigenous communities throughout the world and how different it is from the way that a white colonial narrative has just falsely sensationalized these practices in the past. Like when I think of the way that like white men's history describes African spiritualities, there's a lot of emphasis on blood and darkness that is a weird thing to focus on, first of all. And what I hear you saying is deep respect for Asasiya, a thanking at every step of the process. Thank you for this tree bark. Thank you for this animal's life. Thank you. And in return, I'm going to return my emotion. I'm going to return my energy. I'm going to sing this song and return my life force back. There's such a deep respect for the cycle of life and for Mother Earth in that process so inherently.
Yes. Yes. And I think that is how, unfortunately, colonization will make you believe that these were dark savagery practices. There's a song by a musician in Ghana. It says that before they came, we had our own spirituality, and they wanted to force us into their belief, their God. And so to do that, they have to demonize what we believe was our strength. They had to demonize and paint it. And unfortunately, when you look at the idea of whiteness, right? The comedian Chris Rock said this, even though it's a comedy, he spoke so hard, deep down to my heart. He said, when it's white, it's all right. When it's black, there's something wrong with it. And for me, that is why I am so inspired right now in my life to bring the light of drumming, bring the light of the healing essence, the powerful, deep rituals that my ancestors performed that were healing and brought comfort and brought life to our people, and that there was nothing wrong with it. There was no darkness about it. There was no sort of like cruelty to animal about it, because for us, every aspect of that animal did not go to waste. The flesh fed people in the community. The skin was used as a head of the drum to talk and communicate with people. The blood went back to Mother Earth to fertilize and to give thanks to. The wood that came out of the forest. I have djembes that I brought from home that are still here. They get to live on, and people are playing it today and receiving the joy and the benefit of healing and whatever djembe brings to different people.
You know, this disconnect, it's an act of violence, but this disconnect persists in the sciences and in the academy today. I'm sure you have seen this as an academic yourself, as a professor yourself. I was reading a graduate level textbook just last night, a graduate level textbook that was assigned at an elite institution for my graduate school work. And in a 700-page textbook that is modern, dedicated to integrative medicine philosophies, there was exactly half a page dedicated to all African diasporic medicines, traditions, and rituals. And do you want to guess what they spent their precious time on? They spent their precious time talking about witchcraft and darkness.
Not surprised at all. Not surprised at all.
And that's how in 2026, we're training future practitioners, future doctors interested in integrative medicine to conceptualize African spirituality, African technologies, and medicines that, as you've clearly shown, deserve so much more voice and such a bigger seat at the table because of the richness that is embedded in it. I want to take it back for a second. You mentioned that back home, you never played the drum alone. And I think this is really important because now we're embedded in a very individualistic culture. Many of the listeners are Americans. What do you think is the significance of drumming in community and having it be a collective experience rather than an individual one?
Because we growing up, we never did anything alone, right? I can say from the day you are born until you passed on to your ancestry, there's nothing, and I'm not going to sit here and generalize it like and say Africa, but in my Ghanaian culture, in my Akan culture, growing up, there was nothing that was done alone. When a child is born, you are born to your parents, but then you are born into the community. And that is why there's the outdooring ceremony where you are brought into the entire community, given a name and shown. Now, the power of coming together to play the drum is so significant because everything we did, communities cooked together. The women, when they went to fetch water, you walk with your communities to go grab water together because one, in unity, there's strength. In community, there's strength. In community, there's togetherness. Now, my grandfather would take that and tell you, well, when we also come together as a community to drum, we come in one voice to recognize our ancestry and to recognize our strength. Because in togetherness, that is where we find our strength. And the significance of also playing together is that each person brings a unique sound to the ensemble. And that is why nowadays I get people who will call me all the time and say, can you come and perform? And I said, I do not perform. And you cannot perform with one drum.
Mm.
And that is why in Ghana, we always say the ensemble of drummers, because you have the head of the ensemble, you have the accompaniment, you have all of this. And that is why we also create the beautiful rhythm that comes from. Malogo cannot be played by just one person. The Adowa cannot be played by just one person. The Fonton from, when you go to the all regions of Ghana, when people gather to play, you have different rhythms coming together to form this beautiful ensemble of our ancestry. And I think it's also the idea of healing is never done in isolation. Celebration is
Yes.
never done in isolation. When you talk of sadness, when you're celebrating, because the drumming really echoes everything that we do. When a person dies in a community, it's not just about the family that comes together, it's the entire community that comes together to usher this person to the next life. And for me, that is why it's important to understand the idea of the circle is also a symbolism of togetherness. And Friday, just this past Friday, I was doing an event and I did a workshop. And there was a woman there who said, oh, I have a djembe in my house and I play. And she came and invited her to join the circle. She played. And this is what she said. I'm not making this up. This is what she said. Oh my God, Francis, there is such a huge difference between me sitting in my house playing versus bringing all these people together to form this circle. The energy, right, that we generate, the joy that we generate together the connection that we generate together. So there's something to be said about this idea of drum circle. We feed off of, you and I know that the neural mirroring, when people are feeling joy, it's contagious. When people are feeling sadness, pain, it's all contagious. And we sit together to share in that joy, in that pain, in that connection together. And that is why, for me, I think that there is some spiritual essence to coming together to play the drum as a community, because the universe did not design us to be individuals in our pursuit of healing, in our pursuit of joy. And that is why when you look at society right now, what is happening is, if we all came together as human beings, we'll find so much healing, we'll find so much commonality, versus if we sat in our individual homes and think of ourselves as being higher than the other person. And I think that the other significant that I also want to mention is, when we sit in a circle, there's no hierarchy. There's only one commonality, apart from, let's say, if I'm leading the drum, I'm leading the circle with instructions when I'm doing my workshop. I am part of the circle, even though I am facilitating and I'm leading and I'm directing. And it gives people the sense of, oh, I am the same as this person. He's not sitting above on a stage or sitting on a high stool giving me commands or giving me direction. There is that sense of, there's no hierarchy when we come together as a circle.
You have so perfectly encapsulated one of the major theses of this podcast project, which is that understanding that healing was never meant to be done in isolation, that we are so much stronger as a community, as connectedness. And in fact, I'd argue that there cannot be true healing without community connectedness. I'm curious how you have seen this healing play out in your community. How have you seen drumming facilitate healing and help heal the trauma and stress that inevitably existing in the world brings us?
Well, that's a great question. And thanks for your comment earlier that, yes, in society, we're not meant to heal by ourselves, and community is so important in our work that we do. I have seen it. I think as I started earlier on, I talked about sneaking out to watch ceremonies and how individuals sitting in a circle would sort of get into this trance-like state when they are experiencing drumming and dancing and something taking over. It's this idea of contagious healing, right? And so for me, I don't think I even had the words growing up at 10, at 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I never had the scientific word to really explain that until way back after grad school, and the work that I've been doing and the research and working with neuroscientists from Cambridge and Edinburgh, the University of Edinburgh, and looking at the scientific explanation of music and how it impacts our physiology and all of that. I can tell you, I'll give you an example. I was working with this youth group back in 2018. They are all refugee kids who have come from Africa, from unfortunately war-torn countries. And this really amazing nonprofit in the community here in Denver, working with them. And they brought me to do some after-school programming, because these kids were deregulated. They were having some significant problems in school. And bringing them together to talk about drumming and regulating their nervous system and helping them even learn structure, because drumming, there's so much more to drumming than just sitting there and banging on the head of the djembe or the don't playing with a stick, right? There's a structure to it. And when you teach children who have experienced dysregulation, who have not had a lot of structure in their life, and you bring them together and you say, hey, I want you to take this both hands and let's start playing boom. And some of them go, no, I want to do whatever I want to do. I just want to play it the way I want to play it. And I tell them, yes, you get to play the way you play it, but this is how life is. When you get to learn how to do something right, you can then bring your own personality to it. You can then bring your own style and all of that. And for 10 weeks, you see them making this transformation from being this rowdy, unorganized, dysregulated children to, by the time we get to our 7th week, I will show up and they've already arranged the chairs in a circle. I'll show up and they are sitting down quietly waiting, and nobody is talking over each other and nobody is being disruptive, and they're all sitting there working together and respecting each other. That tells you that the structure of what they've learned has impacted all this aspect of their lives. And so for me, when I talk about healing, I'm not only talking about the healing from mental health, but healing takes place in a different form. Healing takes place in when individuals are dysregulated or structured and they participate in this process and then they get to really be organized in their life. That is healing for me. When children who have always been called into the principal's office participated in a 10-week program, and the teachers who became part of the 10-week program say, oh my goodness, this is the first time I'm seeing child A say thank you and please to another child in a classroom. For me, that is healing, right? And so it comes in a different form. And then I've also seen the healing where an adult comes to just one workshop and so stressed out and tells me, oh my God, participating in this thing, I've learned how to breathe. I've learned how to just stay in this moment because my mind is always wandering because there's so many different things going on in my life. And for this 30 minutes or this hour session, all I had to do was to sit and focus on this and enjoy and experience this drumming that really helps me think of other life, that I need to enjoy life right in the moment versus always thinking, letting my mind run so wild about everything else that is going on in my life that I don't have control of.
I really love how you shared that it's kind of like an active, engaged mindfulness activity, calling the
Yes,
mind back to the present in motion.
yes,
I'm
yes.
curious, what does the research body look like on drumming and in this area?
Drumming is being found to work with individuals who have Alzheimer's. It's been found to work with individuals with cognition problems. It's been found to work with children who have dysregulation problems. So there's tons of research out there. Whether you want to look at the brain aspect of it, drumming and the structure really helping rewire the brain, whether you're talking of neurosequential model of education, that when you really help individuals learn to structure pattern repetitive motion, right, helps us to create new neural pathways in our brains.
So it sounds like we have neuroscience data, we have a lot of psychological and behavioral data and cultural anthropological data that support drumming as a practice. And the way that we currently do science is not always the whole picture. And I'd like to quote you for a moment and something that you said on your TED Talk that really resonated with me. You said, colonial legacy would have us believe that somehow traditional rituals and indigenous healing practices are not effective, simply because they have not been scientifically proven by a white man or a white woman. And you urged people to say, let's not continue in this colonial white supremacy ideology that somehow rituals and traditions that people have engaged in for thousands of years are not effective. In this moment, how does that play into your current understanding of drumming as a practice and as a spiritual and healing practice?
I stand by that. I stand by that strongly. We talked earlier about this idea of demonizing rituals and practices. And now I ask myself, why do you think they do that? Why do you think they do that? They do that because then it'll help them. The idea of always feeling superior is to put somebody down. In order for white medicine, in order for modern medicine that really dehumanizes or demonizes rituals and practices, is, let's just say, this drumming or the animal sacrifices or these are all demonic practices and they are not good for this, and you go in that. Now, I have a better one. Take pills and take this and take that, and that will make you feel better. And who gets to benefit from it? The big corporation, the big white CEOs. And I'm gonna be very bold to talk about that, because at the end of the day, when you demonize these practices, it actually boosts your interest in terms of your pocket margin, your profit margin. There's nothing about really doing anything for the community. And I'm not saying that all white society or all majority white society are all doing that. I love what Australia is doing. Australia has actually partnered with indigenous practices where they are bringing the Inkagaris practice of, when somebody is suffering from a mental health, that a simple pinpoint massage around the head, around the body, actually brings healing. They are incorporating that into their psychological practices and medical practices. However, you see that the big corporations are always the one that are going to say, well, this is not, but they forget that all of their practices actually are coming from indigenous practices. Before yoga became a thing, and you see white women wearing their yoga pants and Lululemons going to yoga studio, before that, there were people who were doing it.
Mhm.
And now it's become a thing because people can monetize it. And I'm not saying that if people are monetizing it, there's anything wrong with it. But I think that the reason why people are shying away from rituals and practices is now everything. My kids and I always make fun when we are watching TV. Thing is to watch drug commercials and then make fun of it. And they'll go, oh yeah, take this when you're experiencing this. And by the way, you have side effects and this and that. And then you go and take this for the side effects. And I always say, growing up, when my grandpa Kojo would go into the forest and grab some herbs and tree bark and all of these roots and come and boil it together, and I would drink when I had some of the most scariest fever or malaria, and I drink it. And within a day, I am back on my feet, running around, jumping. There were no side effects on that. And I realized the last time I went home and I was trying to bring all these leaves and all of that, I was not allowed to bring it into this country because somehow they've not been verified. They've not been vetted that it's not carrying any diseases or carrying any parasites or things like that. And I asked myself, why do you think they are trying to stop these generations of healing and ritual practices? Is because it's going to impact their profit margin. When we realize that as indigenous society, our practices are healing. And I think that has also impacted some of us, right, in a society that somehow if you continue to do this or continue to engage in these practices, that you have not grown or you have not modernized. And so it's impacting our psyche as generations, and we'll rather buy into the medical ideology of healing versus our own practices. And I think it's something that my generation, I always call that, let's continue to be proud of what our ancestors, the blueprints they've left for us when it comes to healing, when it comes to community, when it comes to ancestry, to continue on their legacy. Because if we don't, unfortunately, we are going to have the next generation that are going to not have some of this knowledge for them to go by.
Well said. I am shouting from the rooftops. And I just want to affirm in wholehearted agreement everything that you just said. When we think about biomedicine, and for listeners that aren't familiar, that's the dominant conventional medicine that we have in the United States and in global medicine today. We're dealing most often with a physical ailment, and sometimes we're dealing with the psychology, the mental and behavioral health. But it's a great practice, like you said, to ask ourselves anytime we're dealing with big pharma, is ask ourselves, who profits from this viewpoint? And those viewpoints make their way into science all the time. Say a person has depression. If you follow a biomedical model, you get your SSRIs, you get your antidepressants at the psychiatrist, and you might also go to talk therapy with your licensed psychologist. Both of those things are very individualized, very methodical. Even they are often stealing from indigenous techniques because CBT and DBT heavily draw from Eastern traditions of mindfulness. But I digress. And I feel like that's what's most important about integrative medicine and holistic medicine as a movement, is understanding there's only a certain threshold of healthy that you can be if you don't also have community, if you don't also have joy and laughter and shared experience and a sense of spiritual meaning in your life. Whatever that concept is for you is not important, but some sense of spiritual connectedness and attachment to your community. And those are the kind of things that you can't replicate with a pill. You simply can't.
Absolutely.
But companies would really love you to be dependent on that pill as your sole and only lifeline. Whereas if you come to Drum Circle every week, you have a whole ensemble of people that know you, that are vested in your journey, that process your emotion with you, that feel with you, that move that energy with you, that share the things that you're going through and witness. And listen, y'all, I support necessary medical interventions. That's what makes my line of work and this perspective integrative and not alternative. I am not suggesting that a person only practice drumming for clinical depression, nor that they only take a pill. Sometimes those medications save lives. Medication saves lives. This podcast is not medical advice. And here we respect the knowledge of trained medical doctors from all healing traditions and the lived experience and expertise of patients. There is nuance to every single patient case. And true healing happens in a multitude of ways beyond biochemical understanding. Let there be scientific humility in that there is so much that we do not know. Please understand, a critique of health systems and science's embeddedness within capitalist, profit-driven frameworks is not a wholesale devaluation of the discipline. When we pop off about the problems with dominant psychiatric care or allopathic medicine as a whole, that doesn't mean we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We acknowledge the ways in which this medical system has and continues to save lives every single day. We are not devaluing the work of caregivers in the hospital doing this critical life-saving work, but it bears interrogating. When we come to this example of depression, in 2025, an estimated 1 in 6 adults reported taking prescription antidepressants, and depression rates more than double in people below the poverty line. So financial situation absolutely is correlated with risk of depression. Furthermore, the U.S. antidepressant drug market is currently valued between $7.4 and $8.6 billion annually, bringing in immense profits for drug makers and pharmaceutical corporations. Loneliness is closely linked to depression and several physical conditions. So when the previous U.S. Surgeon General compiled his 2023 report on what he and his team called an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, the team provided over 300 references demonstrating the deleterious effects of loneliness on our physical and psychological selves. They showed that lacking social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. In contrast, data across 148 studies with an average of 7.5 years of follow-up suggest that social connection increases the odds of survival by 50%. A systematic review of multiple longitudinal studies found that the odds of developing depression in adults is more than double among people who report feeling lonely. So let us acknowledge, the science of mind, brain, and health does not exist in a vacuum, as much as we might like it to. It is connected to an ecosystem of profit and a demonstrable history of colonialism, racism, sexism, and extraction. And that is worth examining. So when we talk about interventions that are communal, that are physically and financially accessible, that are intrinsically linked to a reclamation of culture and a transformation of historical traumas, I argue that those interventions, like drumming, warrant the same attention and respect that psychotropic medications receive. Whether you are a patient, a practitioner, a doctor, a layperson, let us all be humble in the understanding that the brain, the mind, and even this body are constantly expanding horizons of comprehension, and that culturally bound practices like drumming could vitally expand our collective understanding of what it is to heal.
Yeah.
I'd like to finish with some takeaways of what beginners might need to know if they'd like to get started with drumming or joining drum circles. Things like how to source a drum ethically, or since this is a culturally bound practice, how can people approach it respectfully that might not have your background? What do you think new drummers should know about this world?
Well, thank you. And I get invited into a lot of spaces. Some I refuse to go, and I always tell them I am refusing because I don't think you are doing it with the intentions that I do mine with. And again, it's not mine to own, and I always encourage people that take a drum and play. However, if you are new, whether you are a facilitator of this really sacred rituals, is to always acknowledge that this is not yours. And especially I tell this to my white colleagues all the time. I said, you have to acknowledge that this is not yours. This is something that whether you learn how to play the drum, and I know that there are incredible individuals there who have learned, studied under masters of djembe, and they can play very well, and they are incredible, they are skilled. And I always say, pay homage to where it came from. Honor the people who brought this incredible ritual to you. And so when you're doing it, I want you to do it with this gratefulness of this came from a place, and I always want another place. So far as drumming, now I know that in our society we have individuals who have different perspective when it comes to the killing of animals. And if you feel like you cannot enjoy, or for ethical reasons or personal reasons, you cannot play the djembe that is made out of animal skin and all of that, I actually have synthetic djembes. There are djembes now that are being made of plastic and fiberglasses. People are using different materials to make the head of the drum. If you're an individual who ethically think, I don't want to be playing on a goat or a cow skin or an animal skin for that matter, you can also get djembes that are not made out of those materials, made out of different materials that you can ethically play on. And so that is what I will encourage. But always, if you're also joining a drum circle, join it with this idea of I am a contributor. You're also going to contribute to the process and not just participate. Go in and create community, because you are going to get as much as you give from the process. That is what I always tell people when they come to my workshop, or when I'm doing conferences, or I'm engaging with organizations who I am helping support, build a team cohesion, or whatever facilitation that I'm using the drum for. I always tell people this: you are going to get out of it as much as you give. It's a give and take process. And so always go in with open heart, and also give and then receive.
Thank you for all of that. I'm so grateful for all of you have given and all I have received. Thank you so much for touching on everything from the how-to of drumming to what it means for you to how it relates to the collective project of decolonization. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me. This was really great. It's always great to be able to talk about this. So thank you for the opportunity.
Master drummers like the late Mamadi Keita say that drumming starts with the women. The women's clapping, singing, and body rhythms as they dance give rise to the complex polyrhythms that emerge within the drum. And in this way, women are the beginning of this practice. Since recording this episode, I've had the privilege of attending a women and NB exclusive drum gathering guided by DC-based facilitator Kristen Arendt. This experience was unlike any other drum circle I had ever been a part of. Guided by instruction in the polyrhythms, we moved song, trauma, and healing through our bodies. It was a flow state. It was a community meditation and a collective effervescence. My mental state was altered. Even though I hadn't had any caffeine or anything stronger, my consciousness changed for the 2 hours that we were drumming together in this room. I cried a little. I laughed a lot. Some women came to the space to connect. Some were working through emotional wounds or doing physical healing, physical wounds. But through this experience, I felt the somatic experience of entrainment, as the scientific literature calls it, where the brainwaves between people become attuned to one another amidst the process of the drumming. I felt like I was a part of my neighbors to my left and my right drumming with me. I felt less lonely, less isolated in my emotional waves as they flowed up and out of my body. And I am immensely grateful to have been a part of this gathering. And I think it really demonstrates how this healing technology can offer us so much healing that goes beyond words, that goes beyond talk therapy, that goes beyond any of these conventional ways to confront, release, and heal trauma. And I say all this with deep gratitude, with deep cultural humility and awareness. While drumming is a universal human heritage, it is indigenous, Black American, and African diasporic communities who have championed and preserved this healing technology through generations of resilience. Ensuring its medicinal power remains a vital resource for all. The fact that we even still have access to these rhythms, that this knowledge is being preserved, passed on, and shared despite immense hardship, should be enough of a reason for people to care about where it came from and to practice it with humility, awareness, and respect. There is so much power in the drum to connect to the earth, to connect to ourselves, to connect to each other, and to heal. Thank you for joining me today as we talk all about drumming. If you dig this episode, please share it. Send it to 2 of your best pals who are into this sort of thing. Or leave me a comment to let me know what you'd like to hear more of. I'm all ears. And until next time, may you rest, resist, and use your gifts.